say it with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I, Douglas Ducote, an American patriot by the grace of God, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America from enemies foreign and especially domestic. Hello, American patriots. Welcome to another episode of the Douglas Ducote Show. Look, I know that you have many other places you could be right now, but you chose to come here, and I cannot thank you enough for being a part of our program. Tonight, there's all types of news that I could be covering, but all they're talking about everywhere, 24/7, is the coronavirus. Personally, I hate that beer. I'm a Blue Moon guy, Shock Top guy. Hell, I would even drink Budweiser before I drink Corona, but thankfully that's not how we get the virus. On a serious note, listen, contrary to popular belief by some on the left that spew their hate, I am not an expert in the health field. I'm definitely not an expert on the coronavirus. But what I do have that a lot of others that are reporting the news out there on this that's different is we have a team, Dustin Gold, Chrissy Piccolo, Marilyn Williams, myself, that look for all the information, gather it up, and look for people that have credibility. The other thing is, on my wife's side of the family, both her brothers are doctors, her sister's a doctor, her cousins, uncles, aunts, they're all doctors, okay? So I get fed a lot of information or I ask a lot of information about this is what's being reported here at this location, or this is what's being reported here at this over here, or this is what the White House put out today. And what's really happening at the ground level? What do you know as a healthcare professional? All right. So I've got that coming at me. I've got personal friends that are in federal law enforcement, county law enforcement, city, state law enforcement that are giving me information that they're receiving on the virus, as well as members in the National Guard, Reserve, and active duty that are friends of mine that, we've already talked about this, and share with me what they're telling you so I can share that with my audience. All right. Besides that, we look at the World Health Organization, okay, which is referred to as WHO, on their program. We look at the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, to get their information. We look at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security and their information. We look at the White House Coronavirus Task Force, known as the Task Force, and the information coming out there, which is a group of all of these organizations, along with local doctors and scientists and biologists and all these people that are trying to come up with a way to contain this and stop this. We're looking at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, known as the Gates Foundation, and the information they're putting out. We're looking at medical journals. We're looking at the coronavirus that's been in existence for years, okay, that's different from what this strain is. We're looking at various media outlets that are like everybody from the Gateway Pundit, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, gathering what they're saying. And of course, we're listening to what comes out of President Trump's mouth and in his tweets. So if you take all of this and combine it together, and you have a team of people that sort it out and try and determine what's fact, what's fiction, then I go from there and report on that, so that we've done our homework to try and show you what we believe we need to be concerned about. And if I believe I need to be concerned about it and my family needs to be concerned about it, then I want you to be concerned about it. Whether or not you want to believe anybody that we research or think I'm blowing smoke, that's all on you. Okay. But one thing that I've always done and will continue to do is not put out a video or talk on my show about something without having some way to back up what I'm saying. So when it comes to the coronavirus, we literally have to dig deep and have a lot of different resources and pull them all together to try and come up with some kind of factual information. And to be totally honest with you, even with doing that, this could all be a big ass hoax. I don't know. All right. I can only go by the best knowledge we have and putting it together, assembling it, and trying to determine where we need to look. I think it all comes back down to the basics of common sense when you're dealing with the regular flu season that we have all the time. Wash your hands. Don't be around sick people. If you're sick, stay home. Go see a doctor. Get antibiotics. Those type of precautions. I believe that is the most important thing. But all that being said, this, depending on who you listen to, should either scare the living daylights out of you or make you go, this is nothing, and move on with your life. All right. So we have to be very careful where we're getting our information and what we're then turning around and sharing with other people on social media platforms like Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. All right. Because there's a lot of stuff floating around out there that if you actually read the whole article, you'd realize that it's not coming from a credible source. Excuse me. You may not agree with the sources or even trust the sources that we are looking at. But you have to remember, we live in a time where these people in these organizations demean the authority on matters, whether or not you like it. There are ones who get to set the official narrative. All these folks that are setting that narrative and have been doing so on damn near everything that we encounter in America, guess what? They're the ones that are in our government, that are sitting on boards of directors, in some cases that are making millions of dollars off of this because they have stock in different companies. Just today, thought entered my mind that, good God, these folks that sell prepper gear, all right, and the preppers themselves, all right, people have been, laughing at them and saying, how stupid this is. And, guess what? Go out and try and buy some toilet paper tonight, or hand sanitizer, or soap, or non-perishable canned goods, or MREs on the internet. Okay? Those folks have already done that. They've been doing it for years. And the people that sell those emergency supplies all over the internet, no matter how much they've sold before, if their company's still in business, they're laughing all the way to the bank right now. They're literally making millions of dollars. And if you think for 1 second that there are people in our government that don't have their hand in that somewhere, well, then you're getting your news from people like Trumpster Bob, for instance. All right. You're being fed a line of crap if you think that there aren't people making profit off of this, regardless if it's real or it's fake. And I believe there's more people that believe this entire deal is either fake to screw with the 2020 election, or they're overhyping it to screw with the 2020 election. What's the number one thing that the liberals and Democrats have been trying to stop from day one of the Trump presidency? And they managed to stop it with this virus. Him traveling around the country and holding massive rallies that are bigger than the Rolling Stones going to putting on concerts. All right, it's like the Elvis raised from the grave and coming out and giving concerts. It's huge. There's more people outside the stadiums that can't get in. All right, it's standing room only with thousands of people. Well, that just stopped. Thank God he's still got Twitter, because the news media is not going to put out his stuff. Let's hope he doesn't get the coronavirus, because if he does and he gets quarantined, wow, he's going to run that battery down on that cell phone real quick on Twitter. All right. Hope he's got a lot of chargers and a lot of battery to keep him going. So the bottom line is, tonight I'm going to bring on my producer, and he is going to help me spread the factual information as we know it, and graphs and charts and all these different things that he does. That's what his expertise is putting these kind of things together to show you what's coming from the world experts, and not Bubba Johnson over here in his cellar basement at mommy's house putting out BS news. All right. So, we hope that we're able to give you content tonight that you're going to go, okay, that makes sense. And I'm okay sharing that. And I'm not going to look like a fool in the long run. And that's very, very important to me and everybody here. But one thing I do want to say to you, if you're in the healthcare profession, or you're a scientist or biologist, or you're working on a vaccine for this, all right, if you have information that you believe should be known to everyone in America and the world when it comes to this virus, all right, we're not talking about all the other diseases out there right now. We're just talking about the coronavirus. If you have information that you believe, and you can stay anonymous, okay, we won't use your name, but we're going to try and vet what you have, okay, before we put it out there. But I want you to go to breaking@douglasducote.com, where you can give us that information and show us some way that we can back it up. All right. Because in your position, you can't go to the news media and talk about it. And we'll be happy to vet it, verify it, and then put it out to the people. And that is one way of helping get knowledge out there, helping people understand what we're really up against. So let's first start with, let's just explain the basics of what the coronavirus is as far as the World Health Organization and Center for Disease Control are concerned. The name for the virus and disease it caused have been announced by WHO and the International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses, taxonomy. The disease is called corona disease, or COVID-19. The virus is called severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, and it is abbreviated as SARS-CoV-2. In the same statement, the WHO also explains that they themselves also refer to the virus responsible for COVID-19, or the COVID-19 virus when communicating with the public. For the sake of simplicity, on tonight's show, we'll refer to the disease as the virus or as the coronavirus, unless we're reading from reports that specifically discuss SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. I don't want to confuse you, but I want you to have the most accurate information as possible so you can do the research on yourself. You can put it in whatever Internet Explorer group or whatever you use to look up your information. On December 29th, 2019, Chinese authorities identified a cluster of similar cases of pneumonia in the city of Wuhan in China. Wuhan is a city with 11 million inhabitants and the capital of Hubei province. These cases were soon determined to be the cause by a novel coronavirus. It was later named the SARS-CoV-2. Coronaviruses are a group of viruses that are common in humans and are responsible for up to 30% of what? Common colds. Okay? 2 outbreaks of new diseases in recent history were also caused by coronavirus. SARS in 2003 that resulted in around 1,000 deaths. MERS, MERS, in 2012 that resulted in 862 deaths. The first case of COVID-19 outside of China was identified on January 13th, 2020, and it was in Thailand. On January 16th, it showed up in Japan. On January 23rd, the city of Wuhan and other cities in the regions were placed on lockdown by the Chinese government. They realized by that point, shit just got real and is getting out of control. Regardless if they made it up in a lab and somehow somebody broke it out of there, or something happened in the lab, or the lab blew up, or who knows how this first person got it. All right. And we probably will never know that. But the Chinese government, within 30 days, locked everything down. And to get information out of them is, well, it'd be like trying to, and within a year's time, convert everything that we get from China into American made. All right. It's just not going to happen. Every other product in your house, sadly, comes from China. Since then, COVID-19 has spread to many more countries. Cases have been reported in all world regions. We can see the latest available data in the dashboard of cases and deaths, which are kept up to date by Johns Hopkins in real time. All right. This is very important that you go check out this platform. As of 6 p.m. Eastern time today, so just a few hours ago, there were 118,101 reported confirmed worldwide cases of coronavirus and 4,262 confirmed deaths. That is a mortality rate of roughly 3.6%. In the United States, there are over 808 confirmed cases with 28 confirmed deaths. That is a rate of roughly 3.5%, so on par with worldwide mortality rates. Now, let me go backwards for a minute. I want to highlight the first bullet point. Let me read it because it's very, very important to you. On December 29th, 2019, Chinese authorities identified a cluster of similar cases of pneumonia in the city of Wuhan in China. Well, I'm stressing that date of December 29th, 2019. That is the first documented date of this type of coronavirus that has sent the world into the panic as we know it right now. I don't want to spread conspiracy theories. And I'm not saying that there's proof of a conspiracy here, but my team caught this all the way back on the first day the coronavirus broke. We have not really touched on it on the show, but it's important. It needs to be mentioned because it will tie in all the information we cover later in the program. On October 19th of 2019, more than 2 months prior, get this, 2 months prior to the first case of coronavirus being reported in China, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economy Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201. Look it up. In New York City, a pandemic tabletop exercise 2 months before the first known person had coronavirus. In their words, during this economic forum, the exercise illustrated the pandemic preparedness efforts needed to diminish the large-scale economic and social consequences of a severe pandemic. Drawing the actual events, Event 201 identified important policies and preparedness challenges that could be solved with sufficient political will and attention. These issues were designated in a narrative to engage and educate the participants and the audience. Now, there are two things I need to point out here. First, Event 201 chose to use, guess what? Their virus is going to be coronavirus, is the virus they highlighted for the exercise. Out of the thousands of known viruses, that happens to be one they chose. Coincidence? I don't know. And second, the date of the conference was October 18th, 2019, while the date of the first reported case of corona was December 29th, 2019. More than 2 months prior to the first case being reported, very powerful people who are now all involved in managing the coronavirus outbreak were holding a conference preparing for exactly what we are seeing happening right now across this globe and here in America. Now, what does all this mean? Do these people love us? Were they ahead of the curve? Was this just a planning meeting by, just so it just happened, planned for, what to prepare for, and just happens to be what's happening right now? I honestly don't know. Okay, I don't. And I don't know that any of us will ever know. But it's interesting, and it does, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my producer play a 10-minute highlight reel from this conference so you can see it yourself, because you need to see with your own eyes, and it's available on YouTube. It was posted and timestamped November 4th, 2019 on the Center for Health Security channel. And their description in the video and on their website says the conference was held on October 18th, 2019. And again, This is more than 2 months prior to the first reported cases of coronavirus in China. So we're going to roll this clip, and then I'm going to bring Dustin on to talk more in depth. So watch this.
Yeah, and Doug, let me just say one thing. That was great. And guys, again, I just want to, because I'm reading the chat at the same time, highlight, as Doug has said, the sources we have to deal with are the people that are managing this and who the government has sanctioned and the White House Task Force has sanctioned. So you can skew the numbers one way or the other, skew the data, the research, the reporting one way or another, but this is as deep as we could possibly get without going around the world with a hand clicker counting how many people have coronavirus. Then later on, after we get through this, Doug's going to go through some personal experiences and some information that we've both been getting and some of our sources have been getting from people in the medical profession in regards to the White House reports that the testing kits are available versus what people in the hospitals who work there are saying to us, and stuff that Doug has gotten from the Veterans Administration. There's a lot of stuff flying around, and there's a difference between the task force. Even President Trump differs with the task force sometimes, and what we're hearing from professionals in the hospitals. But when I watched this, almost probably 2 months ago, I think Dan Golvach, Angel Dad, friend of the show, was the first one to turn me on to this. It was at the beginning of the coronavirus thing. At that time, Doug even was like, I'm not covering this. It's probably going to blow over. I don't want to get into it. It's too in depth. I watched it at the time and kind of blew it off because I said, whatever. I mean, maybe it's a coincidence. As the last couple days, as we were preparing the last few shows, I started to go, wait, where's that Event 201 thing? I've got to watch this. And when I was watching it today, I said, there's a 10-minute highlight reel that they put out, so we didn't edit it. We want to show you what they actually put out. I'll probably pause it in between just to call attention to some things they say, because you're going to be amazed. It actually looks like a Saturday Night Live skit produced today making fun of everything that is going on right now, when in fact, you're going to hear them use terms and words that we hear today and actually predict what we're seeing today. Yeah. And again, this conference was more than 2 months prior to the first case being reported in China. So let me say something real quick before you roll that clip.
Imagine this. Imagine if we were to find out that 2 months before September 11th, all the great minds that be had gotten together and did a role play scenario how we're going to respond if there's a terrorist attack on American soil. And then in that scenario, they just happen to use the Twin Towers, and happen to use airplanes, and happen to say that the terrorists came from Saudi Arabia. And while we're at it, they were trained at a flight school in Florida. And then 9/11 happens, and you go, holy shit. And after all the shock wore off, you realize that 2 months prior, what's the coincidence that all this came together?
Yeah.
So that's how important this is.
That's a very good analogy. All right, let's roll this.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread.
Now, let me just point out there, you'll see those are two people. They were part of the conference from Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins is who is now, regulated by the government, given permission by the government to actually run the worldwide tracking for WHO and the CDC. So more than 2 months prior to the first case reported in China, Johns Hopkins was there with the Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum, which is tied to the World Health Organization, preparing for what was about to come in 2 months.
That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
Just pause right there. So again, this is role play. It's like wargaming. You know, you lay out a scenario. The way the conference works, as you'll see, they have fake news reports and other things they create as like a training seminar. As you just saw, that man said there's going to have to be a tight cooperation between the political class and the business class. Now, what's really weird about this, but this is where this stuff comes from, is within a matter of days, we saw all the world governments, all the world heads of state, all the CEOs, the entertainment influencers, the media, CEOs closing down companies, closing events. Silicon Valley just announced they're not going to have gatherings more than 1,000 people. So everyone was on board. And remember, these are people that we're supposed to believe on the global platform that they hate each other and they're fighting and they can never cooperate and we're going to war with everybody. Yet somehow, within a matter of days, they were all on the same game plan.
We have known about caps-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this: how should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
And let me just point out again, this is their cut. They're real, not ours. It's posted on Center for Secure Health or for Health Security. That music they put in, they make it look like The Apprentice. That is on them. That is all them. We did no editing to this video.
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical. I think the second thing is it's going to be very important that for the business sector, for manufacturers of antivirals, that we have clarity around what the need is and where the need is and who are making the decisions.
I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
And I just want to point this out for you guys. This is not conspiracy theory. You can look it up. Bill Gates' father was at the top of Planned Parenthood. Bill Gates has done interviews with his father going back 10, 15 years talking about it. Bill Gates' father knew Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of Planned Parenthood. You can read her books. I have. She wanted to eradicate blacks off the planet. Hillary Clinton has talked about Margaret Sanger as her hero. But Bill Gates openly for many years has talked at TED Talks and other places. You can find these speeches on YouTube about population reduction. He says that he was inspired by his father's work at Planned Parenthood. And now all of a sudden, this guy, not just here and in this case, but he's been involved with AIDS in Africa and other places where things have spread. He's a questionable character, I'd say. On one hand, he talks about population reduction, eugenics, abortion, yet now I'm supposed to believe that he's looking out for our best interests in all of this, and he wants to save us. That's the only thing I would say from my perspective, and probably Doug's. I know it's a hot topic in the chat and people talk about it all the time. I'm not pushing vaccines or saying don't take vaccines. I never take a stand on that publicly because I think that's medical stuff that you have to deal with in your life and make a choice in your family on that, and it's none of my business. But Bill Gates now is offering, it just came out yesterday, a home testing kit for this coronavirus strain. You get mailed a cheek swab and send him your DNA. I would not recommend doing that. I just think his fingerprints are all over this. Now, I will say, based on the research that we've done, and we're a small team here, there's a lot of stuff I see in the chat, people talking about he owns patents on various strains. Some of this stuff, I'm not calling it conspiracy theory, but some of this stuff I have not been able to independently confirm. So I'm not going to say he was part of pushing this, or he owns this, or he's going to own the vaccine. I have done research into the companies that are getting the testing contracts from the White House, from the government. Some of them are very questionable companies. We're not going to get into all that tonight, but I would just say I would not, if I were you, I'd advise you not to mail Bill Gates your cheek swab and give him your DNA. I just don't think that would be a smart move, considering that he's like been involved with this stuff from the beginning and talks about population, control. It's just, it all kind of comes together, and he's like a weird Dr. Evil character.
Well, as much as I can't stand conspiracy theory stuff, all right, and I go out of my way to avoid it, you can't help but to watch this and know how it's set up 2 months before what we're experiencing, to the freaking letter they were planning for. I mean, you compare it to a Saturday Night Live skit. It is. It's like, no freaking way. And yeah, here it is. And is anybody else showing you this? Hell no.
No.
I'm not going to see it anywhere else but right here.
And after this, we're going to get into what's called the doubling rate, but you're going to see it gets addressed throughout this, and they actually are predicting the numbers being reported, which we'll go into later, and how you could look at them, because I think the doubling rate is the most important thing out of all of this. And I just want to clarify for the people in the chat, I know you brought this up. Yes, there are memes which are accurate in numbers, which have been circulating, that X number of people died of the flu last year, and only this many people died this year. But if you look at the numbers based on when I ran them at 6 p.m., and again, these are the numbers from the CDC and WHO. They could not be accurate. I don't know. I'm just saying that's our baseline for this show,
right?
Because that's what the government is putting out. And that's what President Trump has to work with. So that we're going to go off the same numbers. You could adjust them accordingly. But right now in the United States, the mortality rate, the death rate as of 6 p.m. tonight was 3.6%. CDC reports that the death rate of the common flu is actually 0.1%. So to say it's the same as the flu is not. And the other thing is that the doubling rate, that's where when it goes from 50 to 100, how many days that takes. So if it takes 3 days, that's a 3-day double rate. And then you get to the point where if you can't contain it, it starts to grow exponentially. So that's how you get to go from day one having one person to 3 months later having 1 million infected. And the doubling rate as of tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time, based on the numbers I ran, was 4 to 5 day double rate, which is a lot faster than the flu. So it's a little disingenuous. It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. If you say, here it is compared to the flu, well, we haven't seen this thing. I think on this show, I'd be safe saying within about 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to have a good handle on whether this thing is going to be contained, whether it was a hoax, whether it was about stealing your money, from the stock market or whatever the goals is of the powers that be, or whether or not this is something, whether they created it or whether they didn't, is going to spread all over the place. And as we're seeing, I know a lot of people putting this in as well, reports on what type of people are getting it. As of right now, it seems to be the most deadly to 65 and over. Yeah. We're not seeing a lot of children. The numbers are lower than 1% worldwide. So that's stuff we're going to have to just keep our eye on. But let's go back to this creepy video.
Just to underscore the point that cooperation among supply chain providers or businesses that have huge supply chains can add a lot of efficiency to the whole process.
The question is, can you, through this international mechanism, really promote commitments to doing this as quickly as possible and give people a sense that actually if they contribute more, that they will have a better chance of protecting their own populations and their country's security and health.
So to be completely clear, most of this production would already be committed in contracts.
Yes.
It is almost unheard of that people are producing product without having a forward commitment for the consumption of that product. So the first thing that needs to be done, because this is not something that the countries currently control, unless countries are going to bring about emergency situations and co-opt an existing supply chain.
I think it's not likely, I agree, that countries are not going to buy a countermeasure to put into a global supply without retaining a large portion of it for themselves.
Public health agencies have issued travel advisories, while some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas. As a result, the travel sector is taking a huge hit. Travel bookings are down 45%, and many flights have been canceled. A ripple effect is racing through the service sector. Governments that rely on travel and tourism as a large part of their economies are being hit particularly hard.
Now, I just want to bring up there, because look at what's happening. We know for a fact there's someone that I do some work with. She just had her vacation, which was planned in Japan to go visit her brother-in-law with her family in mid-April. They already shut those flights down. Doug was telling me he just ran into someone at a place he frequents regularly who told him...
She was going to Ireland for her birthday. Her parents booked, months ago, booked this great, because that's originally where their family's from. So she's going to go to Ireland for her first time and experience all that, 7 days in Ireland. And now they're looking at what she said, because they canceled it. Now my parents want to go look at a hole in the ground, which is the Grand Canyon. A hole in the ground, Ireland. Well, she doesn't have a choice.
Right. So we see that. And then yesterday, President Trump, and we'll play some of this in a little bit, because I think it's important for you to see his body language. He wasn't like the normal Trump. He looked really actually concerned and almost defeat. I've never seen him that bad before. Yeah. So you'll see in there, they had meetings all day at the White House. They're talking about possibly bailing out the airlines, bailing out the cruise industry, the hotel industry, the tourism industry. So, this is actually coming out of the White House. It's not fake news. I mean, you might not agree, but this is what the powers that be that set the narrative are talking about. So right there, 2.5 months before the first case is reported, they're creating at this conference fake news bits explaining exactly what we're seeing today, right now.
How should national leaders, businesses, and international organizations balance the risk of worsening disease that would be caused by the continued movement of people around the world against the risks of profound economic consequence of travel and trade bans?
If there's some sense that there's a UN institution that can do all of this, then I worry we're suffering from a delusional disorder on the power of the UN. It's really important to get those industries and their trade associations and an efficient leadership established, which is decentralized, but has a collective responsibility and accountability. And that needs to be supported by the public leadership.
What is essential, what is non-essential travel, we have to clarify this. Otherwise, if we go down to 20% bookings over a long period, the company will run down. That's a fact.
There's a whole complex set of issues in a highly interdependent world on supply chains that are just in time. We need to think about how much flex there is in that just-in-time supply chain system and make sure it keeps running. I think it's going to take specificity, and it's going to take knowledge that only the private sector has. The UN can play an important coordinating facilitation role, but the companies know where those commodities are, where they move, how to move them. And that's where a type of public-private collaboration that we have not generally had in these crises needs to be put together pretty quickly.
We are not out of money yet, but the fact is we are trending in a dangerous direction and something needs to change.
So the policy question for this board now is, how should financial resources be prioritized? Are there nodes that we cannot allow to fail? What is your sense of priorities? We don't have money to pay for all of these urgent problems.
Now, I just want to point something out today that I thought was strange, or yesterday. They started talking about inside the White House, Larry Kudlow, Trump's economic advisor and all that stuff, about, and if you guys have been paying attention, Wall Street, the stock floor closed down for 15 minutes the other day to try to stop the bleed. Now, I've never been one who had a lot of faith and trust in the stock market, and I'm not someone who believed 3 years ago President Trump should have started building his legacy on the stock market, because you can look, people like Soros, Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, these big wigs that are all in politics control such a big enough portion. They can tank it. They can tank it overnight. So yesterday they were talking about injecting money and doing things to try to level it out. And what it starts to say to me, if you just look at it from a common sense perspective, if they're saying that they can do things to stop it from crashing, then are they not admitting to you that it's actually fake? Because if they can rig it today, they can rig it any other day of the week. You know, and this is what they're talking about here. Oh, there's going to have to be special measures we're going to have to take to prop up the market. That means that it's not actually real any day of the week.
So at the moment, we want the fund, right? You need the money. So where's the money? So government can supply some money. A lot of, private sectors, some are sitting here, you have some money. But now you need a really coordinated, centralized efforts.
Hotels will be experiencing, crippling losses doing that. And we know that the hotel business in itself makes up 5% of the GDP.
Governments need to be willing to do things that are out of their historical perspective, or for the most part, it's really a war footing that we need to be on.
Yeah, now did you catch that? That's from the CDC. He just said governments are going to have to do things that are out of the norm. Does that mean suspending habeas corpus, suspending your constitutional rights, martial law? Look, I mean, Doug's probably got a different perspective, or, but I'm someone who was.
Now, New York is activating their National Guard.
Right.
And the National Guard is supposedly being activated, according to the governor, to where they can secure an area north of the city to keep people that are contaminated in.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you this real quick. In this current situation we're in today and everything that you've seen unfold over the last 3 years, would you even think for 1 second, if you woke up tomorrow, that they had all of Manhattan quarantined, that it wouldn't be like any other day now? It's like we're living in a movie, and the thing is, I mean,
if you're going into a Twilight Zone,
right? And I don't know if you guys notice this, and I would assume the audience, a lot of you guys are probably very informed and pay attention to the news and things like that. If you're watching shows like this, then look around the table with all of these liberals with their glasses hanging off the end of their nose, and ask yourself, do you feel comfortable with these academics who live in the world of theory looking out for you? I haven't seen one Bob Jones sitting at that table, one Joe the plumber sitting at that table. All I see.
While we're at it, for those of you that maybe you just tuned in and you're wondering what the hell we're watching here, what we're showing you, and we're the only people doing this, nobody else has shown you this, we're showing you a meeting of all the minds that will work on what do we do if we have a major pandemic 2 months prior to the coronavirus, going through scenarios, exactly what we're doing right now. Oh, and they pick the coronavirus as the one they will highlight. They made up fake news reports, which were showing you all this was 2 months before the first person came up positive. All right. That's why this is so important for you to pay attention to and share this video to let the world know that is something not right here? Or is this all conspiracy? Or are we actually being played like a bunch of puppets? And I shared the analogy a while ago that it'd be like after 9/11, we happen to find out that 2 months prior to 9/11, all the world's powers that be get together and decide to do a drill and talk about what would we do if terrorists attacked America. Oh, let's, in our scenario, we will pick they attacked the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon. And they crashed a plane in a field in Pennsylvania. They flew airplanes. That's what we do. They flew airplanes in the buildings. And where would the terrorists come from? Let's pick Saudi Arabia. How about this? And the pilots came to America and trained in Florida. Yeah, that's what we do. If you saw that, you would go, what in the shit took place on 9/11? Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we're showing you right here. What is the chances that this, and it could be, it's a coincidence, but it's unfreaking believable how this is spot on exactly what we're experiencing this very moment.
Yeah, and I just want to, there's some people in the chat asking, why New York, why Governor Cuomo would be putting, and apparently they're saying National Guard's going to be armed and not down at the border. Look, I think part of what needs to become apparent to people before our real Great Awakening, before whether, you guys are going to fight a civil war in the streets, or whether you're going to start trying to take back your state governments, or whether there's going to be secession movements like the Second Amendment sanctuaries we see all across the country, is that once it becomes apparent that the people that control us don't actually like us, Bill Gates has a huge hand in this, and he talks about population reduction and eugenics, okay? So when it becomes apparent to you that the guys in charge don't actually like you, all this stuff starts to make sense because, yes, why are they not securing the border, but yet they're going to lock you down on the island of Manhattan at gunpoint and tell you can't leave? So it's scary, and it sometimes the truth hurts, but it's becoming more obvious. And I think with President Trump, and he said it actually the other day, standing out in front of Marine One about 3 weeks ago, he said that maybe the greatest thing that he's accomplished, and I've been saying for a few years, this may be what we get out of him, is that he was able to lift the veil and force everyone to show their hand. If that's what we get, then you know what? That's the gift he gave us, and it's up to the American people to decide if they want to free themselves from the matrix or not. It is becoming more apparent every day, whether it be the border, whether it be some of our international entanglements, whether it be this coronavirus thing, that there's definitely people in charge who don't like us, and that's regardless, I think, in many cases, of party. I think they're not necessarily fans of humanity in general.
Yeah.
So let's roll. There's a couple minutes left.
There's nobody at this scenario we're watching that's conservative or Republican.
No.
Not a damn one of them.
No. And the one thing, and I don't know if you witnessed this, in and around your travels working in the military, but I find a lot of the people that work in Washington that are the bureaucrats, are the staffers, are the decision makers, are the pencil pushers, are actually, many of them, void of ideology. Many of them are sort of they don't care, man. They're there to get their check, or they're there to gain power for themselves, and really, they will blow with the wind depending on what's going to keep their power, keep them in power.
Yes.
We shouldn't underestimate the power of entrepreneurship. We need to escalate that, whether it's through the government's helping with tax breaks or subsidies of that nature to increase manufacturing of those types of products. It can happen quickly. A Marshall type plan, don't mean to say that exactly, but a Marshall plan that can go into effect can stimulate change very quickly.
countries are reacting in different ways as to how best to manage the overwhelming amounts of dis and misinformation circulating over the internet. In some cases, limited internet shutdowns are being implemented to quell panic.
How much control of information should there be, and by whom? And how can false information be effectively challenged? And what if that false information is coming from companies or from governments?
I think it's very important that we make sure that there is concise communication with all healthcare facilities where these patients are being treated so that there isn't mass panic.
We're at a moment where the social media platforms have to step forward and recognize the moment to assert that they're a technology platform and not a broadcaster is over. They, in fact, have to be a participant in broadcasting accurate information and partnering with the scientific and health communities to counterweight, if not flood the zone of accurate information, because to put the genie back in the bottle of the misinformation and disinformation is nigh impossible.
Now, just point out quick, obviously we're not fans of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda on either side, and there are news outlets on both sides that do this to spin in their favor of their direction, politically, and their bias. But what that guy just said there was he now wants, which social media pretty much already is, but he wants social media now to become an extension of the government, saying that they are going to become the broadcaster and the arbiter of truth. Now, what is truth? It's a big question, but he is now saying they want social media to basically stamp out. So if they deem Doug as fake news, close out Doug and only push CNN if they deem that to be credible news. That was really dangerous what he just said, and that's been part of the debate on how to handle these social media companies. But he basically just said...
And they're already doing that.
Yeah, they're already doing it for sure. And now this came up in the conference, and that caught my attention when I watched it the first time, because I said, wow, that's really dangerous. So now the government's going to go to them and say, close out everybody on this list that we deem fake news, and then only push the stuff that we want. And this happened probably almost 6-8 months ago with Doug. One of the times when he got a strike on YouTube, there was new information that came out that YouTube was actually going to start turning off certain channels. And if you, the viewer, you guys, were watching what they deemed to be news that they thought was on the edge of violating their terms, how do you judge that? That they were going to start feeding you guys what they called real news, which was CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, and all of that stuff. That was actually written into their terms and conditions, and we have screen captures and everything of that.
One thing we haven't spoken about, and I'm wondering whether it's time to talk about this, is a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news.
I personally do not believe that trying to shut things down in terms of information is either practical or desirable. And we do have, I think, a couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy, second of which is relying and informing and equipping trusted sources of information with the facts so they can then pass that on. But we also need to actually think about a technological answer to this.
The outcome of the CAPS pandemic in Event 201 was catastrophic. 65 million people died in the first 18 months. The outbreak was small at first and initially seemed controllable, but then it started spreading in densely crowded and impoverished neighborhoods of megacities. From that point on, the spread of the...
I just want to point out something there, because it's come up in the chat and people have been texting, asking if we have heard any information yet on the homeless populations that we've heard about in the various liberal cities catching this. And no, they rarely report the names of infected or survivors unless those people decide they want to be interviewed on TV or whatever. But I will tell you what she just said, in poverty-stricken areas. Now you ask yourself, just like you want to know why they're not securing the border with armed military, why we've allowed these people to come in, essentially third worlders, and set up third world tent camps all over the country.
Right.
This is why I said on this show, I think we need 4 to 6 weeks to look at the impact, because I don't see how in any way whatsoever, if the virus is doubling at the rate that it is now, that it is not going to catch onto the streets of the homeless camps
Right.
and is going to spread everywhere because these people obviously aren't bathing,
Well,
they're not clean, and all that kind of stuff.
It's like the whole, cruise ship type situation right now. All right. You've got this ship floating out in the water, has people affected with this disease, and you're going to bring them on shore to put them. It's absolutely mind-boggling. You've got the capability through the military to deliver without anybody being affected with the military by airdropping in all the food and supplies and medical equipment and bio suits and doctors and everybody to take care of them right there on the damn ship and keep them quarantined. Okay. Plus, we have these medical ships that have in the past done this exact same thing, where these medical ships for the military go to countries where pandemics are happening and diseases are breaking out to get those people out of the country on the ship to treat them and quarantine them so it doesn't start spreading in the country. And where do we have this ship right now? In California. What do we have just 10 miles away from it? We have the reserve fleet of all these hospital ships that are waiting to be used, if need be, in the future for something like this. And not to mention the ones we already have that are in service right now. But no, we're going to dock this son of a bitch and bring the people on land and go bring them to military bases to quarantine them. It's shit like that you go, who's running this show? Where's the leadership and the common sense to go, no, that's not what we're going to do. Now, I'm not saying that should be the president making that decision or the secretary of the military armed forces making that decision or the center of who, all right? But somebody is not using their head, and that's typical of government when it comes to basic shit. So let's go ahead and finish rolling.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, just on that point real quick, the other day, 3 or 4 days ago, President Trump said, he said in his own words, if it were up to me, I'd keep the ship out at bay and let them go work over there, but I'm not in charge of it, and they want to do something else. Now, today it was reported that Governor Gavin Newsom of California, big lib, never Trumper, of course, he's declaring a state of emergency so he can get a piece of the $8.3 billion relief package that the president signed, of which I will give him credit. He only asked for $2.5 billion. It was Nancy Pelosi that got it up to 8.3. So Newsom's going to get a chunk of that. But the White House task force, led by Vice President Pence, let Newsom make the call to dock the ship and start taking people off and bringing them into the interior. Why the task force? Why the president didn't put his foot down? I mean, you are in charge. Every one of these agencies works at the pleasure of the president of the United States, and every single one of these cabinet officials and every employee of the federal government and the executive branch works at the pleasure of the president. So I don't understand, but we'll get into that in a second.
Disease was explosive. Within 6 months, cases were occurring in nearly every country. The global economy was in a free fall. The GDP down 11%. Stock markets around the world plummeted between 20 and 40% and headed into a downward cycle of fear and low expectation. Businesses were not borrowing, banks were not lending. Everyone was just hoping to hunker down and weather the storm. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade. The societal impacts, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer. We have to ask, did this need to be so bad? Are there things we could have done in the 5 to 10 years leading up to the pandemic that would have lessened the catastrophic consequences? We believe the answer is yes. So, are we as a global community now finally ready to do the hard work needed to prepare for the next pandemic?
Now, I just want to say on there, that's the closing statement on that. And as you see, I hope that last sentence, the last couple sentences, aren't what's about to come around the corner. Now, distrust in media and government, all that, I think that's congressional approval rating has been at 9% for about the last 20 years in this country. Trust in media across both sides of the aisles at about 15%. It's been that way from even before President Trump. But where she's talking about collapse of all this government, all these systems, I hope that's not coming. Now, I just want to point out for the sake of this, because we're an hour in, there's other stuff in here. I think probably we should hold off on the doubling rate and all that. It's important, but I'm thinking maybe we pick this back up on Thursday or do a separate, because we put out a lot of information. I don't want to completely overwhelm people and then make them forget about what they just heard here.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to show, President Trump's body language.
No. Let's just let's just sit out the next few days and see if he recovers from that. The man's under so much pressure from everything before this. I mean, he can't get a fair shake on doing anything right. The liberal media is so on him. So let's just wait on that. I'll go ahead and there's a few other things I want to point out to the audience real quick, and then we will wrap up this one and put it in the
and let me just say this quick, because this is part of his body language yesterday, I would say, and there are a lot of people that have acknowledged they were pretty worried watching it. You got to put it into context with what was announced from CPAC. So, Conservative Political Action Conference, there was a donor there who tested positive. So right now there's 5 legislators that were connected to that have self-quarantined. There's 1 Democrat not related to that did as well. Well, Matt Gaetz, congressman from Florida, was on Air Force One with President Trump. He shook hands with Congressman Doug Collins. Matt Gaetz today announced that he tested negative, but he's going to continue to quarantine himself because he doesn't know if the test is good, which I thought was highly irresponsible. But with all the media articles coming out, I would just say this is going to be a big tell for me over the next couple of days.
Yeah.
On the left and the right, with all this stuff about CPAC and announcing all these congressmen and Ted Cruz and all these famous ones quarantining, it just feels like they're trying to set a trap for a leak that the president has coronavirus. Now, because he 2 weeks ago said, don't worry, and he played it down, that's going to be spun real hard, and not just against him or his re-election chances. They will try to use that to crash the markets and send the world into panic.
Exactly.
That would look to me like the type of look on the guy's face going, oh, crap, they've got me boxed into some kind of corner and I see what's coming. That was kind of the level of concern I saw on his face, was like, oh, no. Because who knows if they whispered in his ear, hey, by the way, all these guys are quarantined.
Exactly.
So you want to talk about a couple other things? There was a couple people on hold to call in. Do you want me to just tell them to call in first next time on the show, and then we'll take the calls Thursday?
Yeah, let's do that. We're taking very sorry. This is just very important that we shared with you guys this video. The video could have been shared in 5 minutes, but we had to take the time to stop it and point out certain things being said, because if you just watch the roll, trust me, it all doesn't come together as easy as we hoped it would. So we hope that works. So where do we go from here? I don't know, but I tell you this much. It's complete and utter chaos at the government level. That's my personal opinion from all the things that I'm being fed from friends and family members that are in the government. Vice President Pence has told people to go get tests. Multiple sources have told us that various hospitals have no clue what he's talking about. All right. People are showing up at hospitals panicking to get a test to see if they got it, or they have flu-like symptoms or the regular common cold, and showing up, and the hospitals are saying, well, we can't do it. All right. So yesterday, and I'm not going to name names, but someone that I know that works in the medical profession at a local hospital here in Louisiana, told me about a bulletin that was put out in their hospital. And I heard this and went, are you kidding me? Do you have proof of that? Can you take a screenshot of that and send it to me? Because it just sounded complete and utter bullshit. I'll be honest. I mean, that's what I thought. And they went, sure. And then they sent it to me. Now I'm going to read it to you real quick. And this is the bulletin that went out to all the medical staff at this local hospital here in Louisiana. And it says, directors, please inform your staff immediately that, and I'm not going to name the name of the hospital, does not test for the new coronavirus. That is the news, and CDC is telling you at this time, only certain lab facilities can test for the new novel coronavirus 19, which is a send out and takes days to come back. The only coronavirus that is tested here in this hospital is the common viruses. So when they see PCR or any other lab test that states positive for coronavirus, this is not the new beginning to discuss by the CDC. This is a common virus and no need to panic. At this time, we're at phase 3 and doing all that the CDC is recommending. We're sending out updates as soon as they are received. Please ask me any questions you might have, and then their contact information. So, again, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I don't want to give you more confusing information, but I have proof positive that what is being told to us by our government in some cases is absolutely not true when it comes to the actual on-the-ground facts. And then we just showed you a coincidence that 2 months before exactly what's happening right now, even including the stock market, airlines, the whole everything, 2 months prior, they role played. What F? And exactly what took place. And you can go and watch the whole thing. We gave you the information where to get that. We'll put it in the description of this video as well once we're done with the live show and it goes up in the reel for you to watch at a later date. So please share this video once it is the show is over with, and it's it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to where you can share it on social media, because it's very important that people understand that. And I can tell you this, forget the coronavirus. I can tell you this as somebody who spent most of my life working inside the United States government, that when people say, hey, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, run for the damn hills, because chances are you're going to be lied to fit their narrative. It's no different than CNN or MSNBC. If that's where you get your news, you just soon be living in a freaking cave in Afghanistan, because you are a complete and utter idiot if you believe that crap. And right now, every news outlet, no matter who you listen to, is feeding you information. Some of it is factual from what the government says, and other is made up shit that they just are spewing that just doesn't add up or make any sense. As I said before, if you are somebody that's in the medical profession, maybe you're a doctor, maybe you're a scientist, maybe you're a biologist, you're somebody that is trying to come up with a vaccine for this, and you have information that we can vet, and you believe it is true and factual, and we, after looking at it, believe it's true and factual, we will report on that, because that's the only kind of information we want to put out there. You can send that to breaking@douglasducote.com. You can remain anonymous. We will never mention your name if you say so. All right. But we want everyone in America and the world, when it comes to this kind of stuff, to have the factual information. I want to say thank you to my team, Team Ducote, Chrissy Piccolo, Dustin Gold, Marilyn Williams, and all those that have come forward and helped my personal family members, my wife's family that are all in the medical profession that have shared information with us. We will continue to report on this as need be and give you updates. There may be video updates in between the Douglas Ducote show about this virus. But the most important thing that I can tell you and I can share with you, the most important thing is treat this for now just like you would the normal flu season. Those common sense things that we just take for granted and don't do, and then every year we get the cold or we get the flu because we went to Walmart and we pushed around a cart that 50,000 people have touched in the past couple of months, sneezed on it, coughed on it, kids licked their hands and picked their nose and touched it. We touched it and got in our car and did something like rubbed our eyes or picked a booger or whatever, and boom, we have that cold because it lives on the surface. All right. Same type principle. Treat it like with respect. Take it serious. Wipe down the freaking handle before you touch it. All right. They have the little wet nap things there with 99% alcohol in them. You know, at a minimum, do that. All right. Don't go around big crowded places where there's a whole shitload of people that are going to, you know, somebody's going to be sick or coughing or whatever. If you're sick or coughing or coming down with some type of symptoms, don't go out in public. Stay home, quarantine yourself for a few days. All right. Just use common sense, folks, and look out for your family members and your friends and share that with them too. Treat it like you would the normal flu season. That's the most important thing I can share with you right this moment. Wash your hands. All right. And don't touch your face or your kid's face or allow your kid to touch your face until you're clean if you've been out in public touching things. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you very, very much. You had all kinds of other places you could be tonight, but you chose here. And that is what it's all about. That makes it worth me doing this program and all the things that we do to help you, the American patriot. As always, please say a prayer for our men and women serving in the United States military, our veterans, our law enforcement officers, first responders, their families, our angel families, our blue and gold star families, our president, and our country. God bless you, and I will see you Thursday night for another episode of the Douglas Ducote Show. Take care, everyone. I, Douglas Ducote, an American patriot by the grace of God, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America from enemies foreign and especially domestic.